It looks like we have quorum, actually, and let me just start the process. I'm Professor Neil Heffernan. My wife, Christina, raise your hand. Actually, I guess she's got the same last name. Actually, maybe that's not too difficult to figure out, but we've been running assessments for a long time, and I'm super happy to say we've already had something like 10 actually papers actually get published by external researchers. We're now being funded by the U.S. Department of Education to get even more serious about that. Lee's going to give a bunch of details on this, but I'm super excited to be a big open platform, and it also actually anonymizes and shares data as well. I believe the RFP that actually the U.S. Department of Education is putting out, offering $400,000 for researchers that want to work with platforms, are excited to see experiments happening, but also secondary data analysis actually of our existing data sets, which we've done. If you don't mind me bragging, we've done a really great job, and my PhD student won best data set actually in 2 different conferences this summer. And so we have experiments and whatnot worth sharing. Okay, I hadn't hit record. Actually, this is all getting recorded. Actually, record to the cloud. So welcome everyone actually to the assessments kind of funding opportunities actually. And I'm going to let Lee actually go and introduce yourself, screen share, and share with people what are our opportunities.
Hey, I teach at Delta State University with Dr. Liza Bondurant, and she actually just forwarded me this information yesterday, and it looked interesting. So I know nothing about what I'm doing here other than I wanted to learn a little bit more. So
Excellent.
I am in office hours right now, so that's why I'm going to be muted, and I'm going to have to have my screen off because I've got to have a student making up a test at the same time. I'm sure y'all have all been there as well.
Oh, don't worry, Lee. You are not the Lee I was referring to, but you're more than happy to actually have your screen off or whatever and help your student actually.
Oh, I see. There's the other Lee. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you.
All right.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen. And could everyone see my screen okay? Okay. Let me just maybe minimize this. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to our webinar. So glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about several funding opportunities. And first, let's have a quick introduction. I am the research scientist working on e-trials at the WPI, and I'll let Dr. Heffernan and the rest of the team introduce themselves.
I guess I already introduced myself, but Christina and I created assessments. I'm a professor. I teach artificial intelligence here at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Christina, who are you?
Yes, so I was at one point a middle school math teacher, but then Neil and I just started talking about his work, and I became very much more involved in it. And so we consider ourselves the co-founders of Assessments and this eTrials work. And I am now the executive director of the Assessments Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's spun off that allows us to scale assessments, allowing there to be more data for this type of research work. So this is we sometimes call it our third child.
All right, and I should have actually asked people, go ahead and actually type into the chat actually why you're here and what do you think you could get out of this. I'm guessing some of you are excited about our images. Actually, with several million images you're going to hear about that actually we're going to release in a certain way that you can analyze. But if you have an experiment that you actually want to propose, you can start. I'd love to see them actually show up in the chat. What do you want to do with this thing? Finally, back to Hannah. Hannah, who are you?
Hi, I'm Hannah Pandoff. I'm the product manager, product owner here at Assessments for eTrial specifically, also working on the student experience within Assessment. So I'm here for any product questions that you may have.
Great, thank you for the introductions. Like Dr. Heffernan mentioned, please introduce yourself in the chat.
Let's give them some time, Lee, to introduce.
Yeah.
Let's not wait. Let's keep going.
Okay.
We'll see.
So come in as you guys.
And as they start to come in, I'm particularly interested in actually being able to give you some feedback on the practicality actually and visibility of what you could expect.
Okay, great. Okay, so as I talk through, please feel free to post questions in the chat. So as we have all experienced or observed, it is a big challenge to recruit participants for research. And it can take a long time to get a sufficient sample size. So the goals of eTrials is to accelerate research studies and promote rigorous large-scale educational experiments. eTrials is grant supported. We have grants from NSF, IES, and also Schmidt Futures. So NSF and Schmidt Futures funded us to support researchers to conduct studies with our platform and also to get public data sets. Many researchers have conducted studies with us, and over 100 researchers have used our data sets and written papers with them. More recently, IES funded us to add more research capabilities within the platform, including the better dependent measures, best so far condition, and improved data reporting. IES is now providing funding opportunities, which is called 305N, for researchers to get their funding to do studies with one of the 5 digital platforms, including eTrials. So
And Lee, just since we just actually gave a slide that actually has some URLs to point off to the 100 papers written by others or the 10 papers that have done randomized control trials. I was just asking Christina to drop in the chat these slides because I'm sure lots of you are like, do I have to take screenshots of these slides? No, we're going to give it to you right now. Christina, can you handle that? Yeah, okay, good. Keep going, Lee.
Okay, so there are 4 types of funding opportunities we'll be talking about today. The first one is the IES grant competition with eTrials. It is under the 305N grant category. And each team will get 400,000 from IES if it's funded. Yeah, we will talk more details later. Another one is possibility a new grant with assessments. So if you need to add new features, we can partner with you to apply for new grants. The third opportunity is to create a study in the eTrials platform with a stipend. So we provide $200 to set up a study and another $800 to complete a study. And finally, the MathNet project, we are partnering with philanthropy to fund for research on our image data set. 3 awards will be given between 40,000 and 120,000. So next we'll talk about the IES grant competition. The Federal Register notice has been live. You can click on the link to see what's there. And the key dates are by October 20th, IES request for applications will be posted. So you will see more details about the grant application requirements. And by January 6th next year, applicants will need to request feasibility letters from us. And by February 23rd next year, the applications to IES were due. And the letter of intent, the due date is to be announced by IES. So for other details, the IES grant will be for 2 years, and they will fund up to 10 research teams. So here's more details about the feasibility letters. So if you're interested to work with us, you can submit requests to this email address. And we are one of the 5 digital platforms on the CRNet. You can see other platforms by clicking that link. So specifically for the requests, you will need to include 1 to 2 sentence overview of the project and its purpose, and the list of the research questions to be addressed, the sample size, the characteristics required for the proposed study or studies, the research design and a brief description of any measures, content, or instructional approaches that need to be implemented for the study. So IES will make the funding decisions based on the outcome of a standard peer review process. So we don't make the decision. We just provide a feasibility letter to let IES know whether your study is feasible with our platform or not. So applicants will need to build in 6 months of planning at the start of the grant to work out any remaining feasibility issues with the platform team. And here's something we want to call attention. So if the study you want to propose to IES requires assessments to do some programming, basically to add more features, then you will need to ask us to join you with an IES grant under 305A grant, which is a different line. We have, in the past, we have helped 5 different PIs with IES, NSF, and NIH grants, where Assessments Foundation is part of the budget. So it's pretty, yeah, it's doable if you're interested in partnering with us to apply for a new IES grant.
Let me pause here for a second. Let me actually just give my own color commentary. Mark Schneider, the guy that runs IES, actually, if you don't know IES, that's the U.S. Department of Education's kind of NSF thing. He was rather disappointed with multiple different grants that go out of IES and not having big impact. I, among others, actually lobbied him to say we should fund platforms to do research, platforms that have, say, 100,000 kids. Christine and I built such a platform. I am actually, and then we got one of these 5 grants, So we got $2 million to build new stuff into our platform to help researchers do stuff. Like we are building a new, better dependent measure for researchers to be able to use, because us researchers, we always love good dependent measures. We also got extra money to actually go make it easier to document all of our data so people can get access to it. And we also built a feature that will help us figure out what we call the best so far condition. So we can kind of figure out, hey, are the 2 conditions you submitted actually better than our best so far condition? Because our platform should get better over time. Otherwise, platforms won't want to play in this game of helping do research. So, anyways, I'm super glad that after a year or so, we are ready to actually help people propose ideas. Of all the 5 platforms, we're probably the farthest along, but we've been my wife and I have been trying to do this ourselves with simple NSF funding, which you're going to hear about as well in a second, which is much smaller in scale, but it's something you could do today. You don't actually have these nice, better dependent measures, but as I've told you, we've already had 10 researchers get to the point of actually having published papers out the door. So it's certainly usable now. And it would probably be a good thing for you to do if you want to actually impress IES reviewers that you got your stuff together, that you've already got a study running in assessments. Maybe it's only got 100 kids that have been randomly assigned into conditions, but that would probably help reviewers feel like, oh, not only do they have to, the letter from me kind of says, hey, this looks feasible, but reviewers are going to know, of course it's feasible, like you have something going already. Mr. Rhodes, question.
I just could you say a little more about best so far condition? Are you suggesting you've already run some trials in the platform, and in some sense you've eliminated certain ways of delivering content that seems insufficient, and therefore any new comparisons would be relative to a best so far condition? Is that how I should interpret that?
Yeah. So right now we actually have my PhD student is running. We have for every problem in assessments, we actually have 2 or 3 different teachers who have written feedback. We're already running experiments to try to figure out which feedback should we give. But if you, Mr. Rhodes, or someone associated with you says, I want to actually take this lesson from Engage New York, lesson 12, and you want to insert an experiment, you're going to want to insert an experiment with 2 conditions that vary, at least 2, that differ only by a single feature.
So Neil, I think that is the perfect segue to in about 4 more slides, we're going to show you a demo of what it looks like in assessments. And I think that will be able to make more sense. As a perfect question though, Chris.
Okay, but I still want to actually say something about the best so far condition, because actually your 2 conditions is what you usually care about. But if your 2 conditions actually don't actually perform very well, then we need to actually stop that early, right? And be like, uh-oh, we're reliably harming children. We don't want to do that. We're hoping that actually your cool ideas will actually become our new best so far. Like right now, it shouldn't be too hard to beat. We've just had 3 teachers get paid to actually write some hint messages. So, but you can actually, this is not like your psych lab where you have total control over actually anything you want to give out. And if it was not very good, no one cares, because these psych students are taking the class and they have to actually put up with it. No, we need to make sure that what we're doing is actually has a good chance of being reliably better. And so I just never, you will actually use, you guys usually will not really care that you now actually have the best thing so far inside my platform. Like you're presuming trying to do some serious actually science, actually controlling a single variable at a time. But I'm hoping both of your conditions will actually become, well, hopefully you hope for differences between your 2 conditions. And I'm hoping your best one will become our new best so far.
I get it. So I know Christine is trying to move it along, but so in other words, borrowing from medical clinical trials in some sense, you actually have some stopping rules built in that suggest that if the things that are being run are really harming student test scores, we'll sort of stop the algorithm, will stop the test,
Exactly.
we'll sort of move back. Yeah, okay.
We're hoping that won't be actually very onerous.
I get it.
Actually, but if we actually, yeah,
I'll do my best not to trigger the system.
okay. And to be honest, we haven't even written that yet. So there's actually not code that stops anything at the moment. But I'm responsible for this grant to actually have done so. Lee, take it away.
Great. Yeah. So as Dr. Hefner has mentioned, we have some support for you to get started. So we provide $200 to set up a study and $800 to complete a study. Yeah, this is to compensate your time spending with us to get your research going. So next, we will talk about the eTrials platform, which will be used by both the IES grant competition and also the stipend studies. eTrials platform is free and it's for randomized controlled trials. It integrates assessments. Assessments is a free online K-12 math learning platform. It assists students and provides assessment data to teachers. We use popular OER curriculums like Illustrative Mathematics and Engage New York. So how it works, studies will be developed with ETP and then it will be delivered to students through assessments. And here is a demo by Dr. Heffernan.
So before you hit actually play, I just want to say one thing. The National Science Foundation funded us, and those little $200 and $800 little stipends are funded by NSF. We have a NSF grant to start this process that actually happened years ago. And so, but it turns out those, you can kind of use that as your starter pilot project, maybe to actually go for an IES proposal where, oh, and let's be clear, all of this money you get, I don't get anything out of. I mean, like, so if you get a $400,000 US Department of Education grant, that's all you, and it's to fund you to go build your studies. Christina and I and Lee are supposed to help you get going and do something actually, but we've, I talked Mark Schneider into, among others people, into actually buying into this platform idea. And I'm kind of morally obligated to be like, let's get some good proposals going that show that this platform idea actually could scale. So, all right, I would just want to show you from the teacher perspective how actually these things get assigned. So go ahead and hit the button, and I'll talk about this. Actually, mute it, please.
I'm often asked, what is this?
So anyways, here's the main site of assessments. It's changed a little bit, but actually just hit the play button, but mute it, please.
Okay, here.
Right there, yep.
Yes.
So, so anyways, if you scroll down on the actually assessment site, there's the big 3 free curriculums: Illustrative Mathematics, Open Up, and Engage New York. So if you go into 7th grade, you go into like unit 2, you go into like lesson 2, actually, and then one of these things, you will see these problems are from actually either Engage New York or Illustrative. And any 7th grade math teacher will know, hey, I recognize that. That's the book I'm teaching with. What you're going to be able to do, and here's actually the teacher can just go in and assign it into a class. Actually, they can put down a release date, but in this video, I don't even do that. Then they can go click and see it. Over here, this is Google Classroom. I didn't make Google Classroom, but we integrate with it. Now we've actually demoed coming back and seeing what's going on. This is teacher report. This is what it looks like from the kids' perspective. If they type something in, they just got a feedback message about what's wrong with 9. If they ask for a hint, and that's what you get to do. You get to write hints. You get to see what that shows up in that little yellow thing. This is an example of what a teacher actually is doing. Some people, like actually Chris Rhodes on this call, actually work with people like Rob Schoen. They really care about how do teachers use this data. For these experiments, we really are not focused on that. We can stop the video now. We're focused mostly on actually what is the feedback to the student, okay? That is what we can randomize really well. That's where we get a lot of statistical power. So, all right, I'm done with my quick 1-minute demo.
Okay, so here are 2 video clips about student experience with hints and explanations, which you can watch later. So, why use eTrials platform? There are some advantages. It is free and it integrates with the systems, which is free and uses popular OER math curriculums. It integrates with Google Classroom, Canvas, Coursera, and the edX. So you have a lot of options. And what's the best is that it connects with a very large number of teachers and students. And eTrials platform can be used for studies both in K-12 or higher education. If you use the OER curriculums in our library, then you don't need to recruit your participants. When students do the problems in our platform, the data will just automatically come in. And we will provide student learning data, prior learning data, and also clickstream data, so you can have a more detailed analysis. And our platform integrates OSF to auto pre-register studies for researchers. We always provide researcher support.
And so let me actually add something on here, because I actually recognize some people from actually Chris Hulleman's lab is on here. I was just chatting with him. I was walking around actually last week, actually holding up this little flyer, like some real estate agent, actually telling people about this and helping them understand how they could bring their work into a platform. Chris Hulleman is one person that actually is excited to do 2 things. Build something, insert it into our platform, but also be able to do a little bit of actually what actually is also possible, which is you can use our platform also with your own recruited subjects. So you might want to do some pilot testing using our platform to actually test out your measures. And so you could do that with whatever actually subjects you actually have. We probably have a lot more subjects than actually whatever you're going to do. But if you talk some 7th grade teacher into doing something, or even if you want to pilot test your little measures with undergraduates, you could do that. That's why there's these 2 types. Most of you are probably here because we actually have lots of students and we can expose your intervention to a lot of students. Next slide, Lee.
Yes. So there are 3 types of studies you can propose using our platform. The first one is support comparison study, which is to compare student support. As you can see here, student supports are hints or explanations for math problems. You can also propose a problem varied study to compare math problem content, but you will need to recruit your own participants, which we'll talk about more later. And the third type is skill builder studies. So skill builder means students get 3 problems correct in a row, which we'll talk about more later. And for support comparison study, as I mentioned, it's about comparing the student support. And you would need to use the original problems from the OER curriculums in our library, but there is no recruitment required. Here are some examples that I want to show you. So in the first example, you can compare text versus video feedback, like what's shown here, where you can compare motivational videos versus no video. So here we have an example of comparing no video to motivational video with Dweck's growth mindset and motivational video with Pecron's value of task. In the third example, it's about comparing step-by-step support or full worked examples. So as you can see on the left, the support is broken down into steps, but on the right side is a fully worked example as a whole. So one of the benefits of using our platform is that we allow multiple problem sets. So, you know, in educational research, one of the common limitations is that the duration for the research is usually very short. If you want to have a long intervention, you can use our platform. Our platform can keep students in conditions. So for example, on day 1 with problem set 1, student A receives condition 1, student B receives condition 2. Then on another day with a different problem set, student A will still receive condition 1 and student B will receive condition 2. So this way you can have a longer intervention and maybe you will detect some effect with the longer intervention.
And I'm just going to add something actually on this. David Utall is a researcher at Northwestern. He's a good educational psychologist. He actually inserted 3 experiments into assessments that would had to do. He's a actually mental rotation, actually visualization sort of actually researcher studying actually how people visualize things. And so anyways, he had 3 different problem sets, and we had to years ago, we had to randomize each one of them separately. So which means that if you wanted to compare 3, you know, kids that got all 3 actually at the same time versus we're in the control condition all 3 times, he kind of lost lots of subjects. We're kind of like bled out. I'm glad that actually with our NSF funding, we were able to build out a new infrastructure that we're bragging about here, which is we can hold kids into condition across multiple different problem sets.
Okay.
That's all. Keep going.
Thank you. So another type of study is problem varied study. So this type of study is about comparing the problem content. You can make your own problems using our platform. And here are some examples linked to some of the papers that have been published. And you can take a look at your own time. But with problem varied study, you would have to recruit your own participants unless it's a skill builder study, which we'll talk about later. However, with a problem varied study, you can do it with both K-12 and higher ed students. Basically, there's no limit on what you can do. You can do any content in your areas. And we have a lot of options to implement your study. The study can be assigned through Canvas or Google Classroom, or even LTI integration with Coursera and edX.
And let me just say something about it. Actually, many people will come to me saying, I want these kids to do these problems. And I usually say, go away, okay? Because I'm usually like, our teachers are coming to us because we give out Engage New York and Illustrative. They are not interested in actually giving kids random stuff that you researcher came up with, okay? They're focused on their curriculum, and if we don't give them what they asked for, they'll leave us, right? But there are some little tweaks you can do with say skill builders, and so it's possible for you to do problem varied studies. But I don't want to get the wrong idea. Teachers are doing Engage New York and Illustrative. Okay, what you get to do is you get to modify anything you can put on the web in an HTML blog. That's a video message, a text message. That video message could be focused on Carol Dweck's theory of actually growth mindset or Peckman's theory, whatever you can do in an HTML blob, you can actually run in assessments.
The alternative though to the go away is that you can recruit your own students and your own subjects, and you can find university student, whatever it is, and that's an option as well. But Neil's spot on with when it's with our group, it's the previous version, which is the support comparison, and all you're comparing are the supports, because the teachers who are using assessments want to make sure all their students get the exact same problem. So support comparison study allows us to auto deploy out to our group, and then, but if the problems are different, there's a little bit more work with recruitment.
Yes, thank you.
Just to be clear, that's what the February IES deadline would be supporting. So
Well, honestly, if you want to, like, you get that grant involves a lot of funding, so you could use that funding to do your own recruitment.
right, that's what I'm saying. In other words,
I mean,
the primary
yeah.
purpose of that RFP by IES would be to fund something that, you know, the amount of money they're giving out would be such that you would imagine funding something like that.
Or
So,
you
like-
could decide to build content for 3 units in Engage New York, and we would keep the students in condition throughout the whole 3. Like, you could spend a lot of time really doing an auto deploy within assessments.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say something more about how, like, for instance, interventions, like, hey, would you, I want to help actually people like Chris Holman, who's like, oh, hey, our intervention is about, hey, getting kids to actually first think about what do you need to do in order to actually prepare to do studying? Like, how do you actually, maybe you want to put your phone away, like getting kids to actually write some things. That's not your normal Engage New York problem set, but you could build a skill builder that actually would allow you to do this. So, but let's hold that question because we'll be there in a few slides.
Okay,
Keep going.
yes. So the same as the support comparison study, for a problem variety study, you can also use multiple problem sets, and we will be able to keep students in conditions. So next, I will pass it over to Hannah for a demo on the eTrials platform.
One sec. All right, so this is when you log in, you land on your My Experiments page. I'm just going to walk you through how you would kind of build a support comparison study. So, but you can see we have 3 different phases, so you can kind of track where your studies are at any point. So I'm going to build a support comparison study. Oh, it's going to take a second, isn't it?
We have the guts to do a live demo, actually. Let's keep going.
So you can come in here once you've created a study. So we've talked about it previously, but if you have an OSF, if you put in your OSF ID, then an OSF project has already been created for your study on the back end. So then you can name your study. I'm going to say hints versus images. You can come in here and write whatever research question you would like. And you can either use, kind of that navigation or up here. Once you're on your conditions page, you can add, I think we have a limit of 20 conditions, but you can add as many conditions as you want. Doing auto deploy, like we said, kind of helps, you can have a vast number of students. So having a larger number of conditions is kind of really a nice benefit of the eTrials. So I'm going to say words and then images for this one. I'm going to add a problem set, so you can come in and you can filter by grade, by curriculum, even by skill if you would like to come and try to find a problem set. I'm just going to select this one. Oh, one thing to note is that you can then look at your problem sets here. So if you wanted to add more problem sets, you can, and they would just kind of continue down on this page. And then to build out my hints. So I'm going to come here and go to words, add hence, 1 of 2. We are building out our student experience. We're updating the UI. So with that, these hint boxes, that's what the student will see once we launch that new student experience. So you can come here, you can edit, you can drag and drop, reorder them if you want, once you've kind of built anything. And then again, for images, I'm just going to come here, and we do support up to 1 megabyte. So I'm just going to make that size. And you can have an image, you can have a GIF if you want as well. And you can see that. So those are my 2 conditions for this problem. And then you can go through and just kind of fill out all of those problems that you have. And then next is our deploy page. So here it just reminds you what you've already put in, and then you can preview this as a student. So if I want to come in and see what it's like for these students in this condition, I can then come here and see the intervention that I've completed. So yeah, then once you're happy with your study, you can submit for deployment. And you'll see that it's moved and it's in waiting approval. And then what we do on the back end, the eTrials admins will just kind of review and make sure, kind of work with you that everything is looking as it should and that it's not harmful to students. And then we deploy it. Once we've deployed a study, I'll show you if it's not going to take forever. But it tracks the number of participants, actually. This one I have 1 participant in, so you can see that it tracks that number on the study card itself. If you're in the study, it will show that up here on the top right-hand side, and it'll show you other information that is needed. So yeah, so that is the platform so far.
Thanks, Hannah.
Mhm.
So, great. Actually, Lee I think is next actually talking about skill builders, right? You're muted. And but anyways, I'll start talking about skill builders actually, because I was going to do.
Let me share my screen.
Great. So skill builders, as already has been said, actually are these little things where you have to get 3 right in a row in order before you move on. We've created something like 300 of these skill builders, and about 30% of them have been checked out to actually be put into a study. These I'll just use an example. Actually, Chris Holloman, because I just happen to know he wants to actually ask kids, hey, this sort of get them to think about actually. Well, here, let's just pretend the study is, hey, I want you to think about before even starting your homework, actually, what are the things that could distract you from doing your homework? I'll just make this up, right? We can expose to half of the children actually this message, half the children, they don't get that message, okay? And we have to make sure we don't screw around with their 3 right in a row, so it's a little complicated, but if we do that at the very beginning of the skill builder, we can get that done. And so I'm super happy, actually, if you go to this link right here, it was our best winning data set. This particular paper, Exploring Common Trends in Educational Experiments, reports on 50 experiments representing actually 30,000 times the student was randomized. If you know of a study that actually has anything like that in, please let me know, because I think actually we have released the biggest data set ever at the student level, okay? Many experiments that might involve 30,000 kids, but it's really just maybe 100 schools randomized, but this is student level experimentation, so you get a lot more statistical power. In this sort of thing, no recruitment required, actually, and you can start to do some customization, okay? We're still got to get them, teachers are saying, hey kid, go do Pythagorean theorem until you get 3 right in a row. So we don't want to really mess around with we're not messing around with the content. They still need to get 3 right in a row. But if we do a little bit, we can pull that off. Next slide, please. So when I said there's 50,000 kids, if you add up the numbers here, or we did a whole bunch about how many right in a row do you need to do. The ones in the middle are all comparing to answer only. Turns out most things beat answer only, where answer only is they hit a button that says, and here's the answer. The bottom ones, video versus text, comment on answers, adaptive, fill in the blank. Let's go to the next slide. We reliably showed video working better than text on average. We harmed children with our motivational messages. I came up with ideas that sucked. I'm hoping you guys have better ideas than my ideas, because that's not good. Our adaptive stuff was actually reliably beating stuff, but just by a small margin. Our comment on answer, actually feedback messages, actually were not very useful. Turns out when we went and looked at them, the last line in text, actually, my friend Stacy Shaw from across the hall was like, Neil, why are you yelling at children? I'm like, what are you talking about? And we actually had red text saying you're wrong, and it was in all capital letters. Good, I'm glad we're fixing that and seeing, can we now do better? Anyways, there's a few other options, choices, where it was actually not actually very definitive, but you can look at these sizes, like 12,000 kids actually participated. So anyways, we also looked and saw that fill in the blank is a lot better than making things multiple choice. That one is not very well. Anyways, I'll stop. Next slide. So right, and here I guess I jumped the boat. I already told you about David Utah, who wanted to actually keep kids in condition, and so we can do that now. Just bragging about the technology stuff that actually NSF is funding us to do to actually help researchers like you guys. Next slide. Oh, so Erin Higgins, actually, when she's the program officer, she actually talked about secondary data analysis. So we've released, say, this data set. And so if you want to do secondary data analysis on our publicly available data sets, you could also propose to do that. Actually, you could propose to say, hey, let's try to actually, because we're excited about trying to learn personalization. The actual formal RFP will actually, the feds actually are required to actually have it out by October 20th. And so you'll get some more details. And we'll see if they actually do allow funding for secondary data analysis. Next slide. All right, MathNet. Christina, you're up.
Sure, and you can keep sharing your screen, Lee, thanks. Yeah, so on that vein with open data sets, we are working with, and you can go to the next slide. We're working with a team of funders who are interested in finding out if our data sets with images of student work can be useful for any AI work, any sort of thought work. So we have a sample data set, and maybe Lee, if you could grab I guess you're already online, you don't want to do that. I will put in the chat a link to our page on our eTrials website that's all about this MathNet program. We have a small little sample data set you can look at, and then there's an RFP that you can apply to explore these images. There's over 3 million images. You can explore the images, see what it is that can be done. They're really thinking very exploratory. So come up with a really good plan, and they might fund you to do that. If you go to the next slide, Lee, go to the next slide, just so I was trying to make sure you saw these images. So literally, guys, we got 3 million images, and I know we have at least several people that I saw in the chat. They're here for the math thing because they actually want to do some cool processing of these images. So you're looking at images. 3 million times a child has said, this is my math work, and they're uploading it into assessments. Okay, what can you learn from that? I know actually Bob Siegler actually came to our webinar. He's an expert in actually students processing of fractions. This set of funders that I talked into actually funding three groups with $140,000 to $120,000 actually award, actually they're super
they're super excited actually to see actually what people could propose. So they don't want to just fund just hardcore machine learning people that just do convolutional neural networks. Like that's what I teach in my class. They want to see what is some cognitive science components to this. And so I encourage that. Back to you, Christina.
Sure. There's not much else to say. There is a webinar on this page, the MathNet page on our website. The full webinar is all about this one project. So you can go watch that. You can look at the slides and you can get the RFP and take a look at this sample data set that allows you to understand what's in there. If you go back to one slide, Lee, there's going to be problem data. What are the problems? Problem log data, problem logs to image name, problems to image name, and the student images, the actual images the student did, and the images from the actual problem. So the problem is given to the student. Sometimes there's an image, but the real image that's of interest is what the students turn in. So
Also, hundreds of thousands of times, the teacher has graded the image.
Right.
And you could use that.
Yeah. So I think that if we go forward to, that's what we've got here for you today, and hopefully some people have a few questions.
Yeah, next slide, and with the sort of like the emails.
You can put them in the chat, I'll read them, or
Just
or
unmute yourself.
unmute
This is
yourself
all.
and ask, please.
Unmute yourself and ask a question. Just took my niece actually to visiting colleges. She couldn't come up with a question that she to save her life. You guys are professor types. Come on, ask a question. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Questions, Neil, but you've heard a lot from me on the call, but
Good. Go ahead, be active. No one else is actually asking questions. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll fill the time. In fact, it's what I always tell my students, right? I mean, they said that, you know, as long as you can filibuster for 3 hours a week, you get to be a professor. That's pretty much the criteria. So just on the deadline for, I mean, well, I'd be interested in having a larger conversation on the image one. But I think, you know, our team here at UConn, you know, has some nascent ideas, but we're just not sure, you know, where they might go. So I feel like we might like facilitation from you guys on other people we might connect with to kind of build a team that could do something. You know what I mean? I'm not sure we have the capacity internally. And I guess I noticed on the original call that you forwarded around, you had like a mid-October deadline, but it sounds like there's some flexibility there. So maybe just say a little on what the timeline might be if we're generally interested in that, but not sure
So
how we
my
can put that
advice
together.
So my advice is Kristen and I talked these two philanthropists into actually funding this. Like they, out of their goodness of their own heart, actually are like, people should have access to all your locked up images, Neil. Like, how can we do this? And we're now come up with a way. They funded us to actually do the data description so you can actually have good data, and also all the legalistic stuff actually to hire lawyers and figure out how to do all that sort of stuff, and make sure this doesn't go viral. Because I don't know, there's going to be in one of these images maybe, and their handwriting is actually kind of personally identifiable. So we're not just releasing that willy-nilly. You need to get a grant and sign a bunch of actually things saying if your data gets out, we're going to take your firstborn, and your university needs to sign for this, and because this is serious. But I will say that actually, if you have an idea, you should actually email in saying, hey, here's my one pager. Actually, am I going in the right direction? Lawrence and Doug are excited to actually see people actually with their ideas. They've never done this before. They arbitrarily kind of said 10 pages, actually October 15th. You could probably talk them into actually, I think most of us are kind of like writing a one pager or then maybe even a 3-pager being like, hey, this is where I'm going. You'll get a lot of feedback because they're super excited actually. And to be honest, they're not as well known as NSF or IES. So you don't have to write a dense 15-pager for NSF for these guys to get started and get some super valuable feedback.
Yeah. Someone asked on the ImageNet, whether there would be, besides the problem logs, would there be any other data that can be used? So there's data on how well the students did on other parts of the problem. So when you watch the webinar, just the MathNet webinar, we did a whole hour just on MathNet, you'll see that some problems come in two parts. One part is scored and the other part is open. So you can get the score on the one part to go with the image that came with the open response part. So that's one other piece of data. And then as Neil alluded to, we had teachers who took the images and they actually gave a grade and they wrote a message to the student back. So we have that data that goes with the image. So you can, if you do that in bulk with fancy AI stuff, you can probably start to see patterns and, with natural language processing and things to go along with your efforts to actually do any AI or any work on the image.
And we're also happy to give you the whole clickstream data for every kid. The 50 experiments that I actually alluded to, we initially just gave out the data on actually how the kids did on that problem set. We just actually submitted to another conference where we actually did those same 50 experiments, but now we actually give out every problem that any child that participated in the experiment is in. So if you actually have some deep hypothesis about kids that actually, in order to do well on Pythagorean theorem, let's go look at how they do on exponents, equation solving, and order of operations. Those are prerequisites to Pythagorean theorem. You could go look at that. So yeah. And luckily, most of the data in assessments is computer graded. So it's really easy to give that out. In fact, we've already given out actually huge swaths of, like, when we alluded to 100 papers have been written using assessments data, we've gotten kind of famous for actually just the computer graded stuff, where lots of people are trying to build algorithms to predict which problems which kids will get right. That's cool. More questions. Did you see anything in the chat, Christina?
The IRB, so it's BHAM. I don't know the whole name on that person, but I didn't understand exactly what the IRB is and how to fulfill this condition. The team must include at least one faculty member professional. I think that you're referring to the MathNet. Like Neil said, there is a possible, there's possibly student identifiable information on this pictures, because if you hold up, some kids do this with their work. And so we might have some PII in that data set. So we need to make sure that there's a university behind the reception of that data.
Let me add this. Bianam, actually, or whoever you are, feel free to actually unmute and actually show your face and ask your question. Are you a graduate student, actually, and your professor doesn't know what you're doing? Are you a faculty member? All right, if you're a graduate student and you don't have your
There's
go ahead. Yeah, here, you got unmuted. Go ahead.
No, yes, I'm a researcher at a university
Good. Okay, where?
in Switzerland,
Switzerland.
Swiss
Okay.
distant.
Excellent. My PhD student's gonna go off to Switzerland next year. Anyways, and are you all right? So you're a researcher, right? So this is not going to be very difficult for you. You can go win this grant and then get your equivalent IRB stuff done actually after you get notice of funding. But one thing you'll actually, but you will need to actually have your university sign on, right? We don't just hand out a personal data, but a set of data set to actually just like random graduates. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, great. Lillian, go ahead. Hi, we're not hearing you. You're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Just give you some time here. I'll give you. Hello. I can see you're trying to talk, but we can't hear you. Here, you keep messing around with that, actually, and it's.
Or put it in the chat and I'll read it for you, Lillian.
While we're waiting on that, hey, Faye, Kui, you got a question? Actually, we have a moment. Actually, while
Already
we're getting
answered.
Lillian. Already
Yeah,
answered?
I was
Okay.
I was asking about if we got any other like text data that for the text mining or NLP era is besides I know we have the problem description, also the log, and Christina just sent a link to show some the sample data with other like the scores and the grader, the message from the grader. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Make
and
sure you
so,
go watch the
right.
video.
And so I'm super excited for you to know that not only do you get the images, you also get all the text versions. Gobs of kids don't show up an image. They just write down something, right? Which you and I know, if you're trying to actually somehow understand these images, having access to the text of other people would be really handy, particularly knowing this teacher graded a bunch of kids, some that had images, some that was just text, so you can kind of know what they are thinking is good. Myself have used BERT and GPT-3 and various other things to try to actually do some evaluation of how good can we score. But I don't want to emphasize too much on the scoring thing, because you could do all sorts of things that are not just scoring. But we'll give you access to all that.
Yeah, let me just clarify. You just Dr. Hoffman, you just mentioned that there are some like most of them maybe more will be on the image data answers, but there are also some text answers. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we have lots of
That's good
that.
to know.
I think we have 60, last time I checked, 60 million times a student answered a question. 6 million times they put up an image. So most of the time they're answering in text. It's just easier for them usually to type rather than, oh, get the camera out, take a picture of their paper. Though you and I know writing on a piece of paper is what we want them to do anyways. But oh, you know, anyways, Jill, Lillian, did Lillian get your mic to work?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Again, yes.
Oh, so sorry. I was using Teams all the time and the Zoom
No
didn't
problem.
up in my computer. And hi everybody, I'm Lillian, and I have the same issue as Becknam because I am a data scientist working for a corporate and ed tech company for 2 years now, and it's super hard for me to get an IRB, and I'd love to cooperate with the super awesome teams and teammates right now presenting here. So basically promoting myself as a data scientist who are experienced in machine learning and deep learning. So if, anybody needs an extra pair of hands, I'm here and looking forward to hearing more about your awesome ideas. Yeah.
Feel free to interact with me a little bit, actually, because I do know that the spirit of actually what Lawrence and Doug are trying to do is for people to do this in an open way and open science. And so one could imagine their trepidation might be with a company like this isn't meant just for you to then go get this done and then your company does better and we don't tell anybody else in the world. I know that won't fly, but maybe you can actually provide the right sort of assurances that whatever comes out of your guys' work is open, and then I think that's what they want to see.
Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in fraction mathematics education, and I saw a lot of interesting images in the sample data set that is related to fraction solving, and I think, and also currently I'm working for a company who develop educational games for students who learn fractions. So I think it could be a very interesting combination of how we, try to figure out how students think in solving fraction problems. Yeah,
Great.
and yeah, it's quite interesting to combine deep learning and learning science and, psychological, yeah.
So this gives me an opportunity to actually say something that's useful for all of you. So if you guys are interested in the image stuff, you should write up a one-pager actually and send it on in to that email that Christina's, I think, dropped in the chat, or is certainly in these slides, and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Before you go write 10 pages, just get some initial feedback. All right, should we say we're done? I think we're at time, right?
We're at time. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
All right, it was
Yeah,
fun.
thank you, everyone.
Look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Bye-bye.